So news used to be delivered to us, to our homes, to our living rooms, in well-crafted packages. Then came digital, and all bets were off. News became something that was ubiquitous, pervasive, even commoditized. I'm wondering though, well, for the longest time, the mantra in our business has been go where the customer is, be where the customer is. And I'm wondering, maybe Kat, you could kick us off on this one, if you think that is actually still serving consumers, in particular, in terms of user experience, context, brand, disinformation, misinformation. There's a lot.
Yeah, I think it's still true today. I think our brand, the Washington Post, especially as we move towards reader revenue, is really based on habit and loyalty. But you can't develop habit and loyalty if you don't find new audiences out there in the wild. And so it's really important to us to reach people where they are, whether that's on social platforms or in the various forms and formats that they're used to, whether that's YouTube, podcasts, et cetera. Getting out there and being in the places where people sort of are naturally encountering news and having them come across the Post is really important to us. But just as important is making sure that when they do find us, they have an opportunity to start a relationship that's ongoing and deep. And that, that's the measure of success in this ecosystem, is that once they encounter you, one time isn't good enough. It's about a relationship. And so a lot of our product focus, and our editorial focus is on making sure that each of those points of connection, every time we reach a new person, we are intentional about starting the relationship and sort of bringing them deeper into the Post experience, whether that's to another piece of journalism or into a habit forming product like, an app or a newsletter or a podcast. And so it's absolutely critical to continue to reach people no matter where they're consuming their news. Because they're going to be getting information, right? And making sure that they get quality information and they get information from us is really important.
Great, Mike, I'd love to hear your take, and maybe I'll throw in a little extra bonus for you. How about for news providers? Has it paid off?
Well, to build on what Kat said, I think that there are some things that remain the same, and then there are some things that are very different in terms of the how. The quality of the journalism, the importance of reporters having relationships with the people that are their sources and their communities that they're within and the industries that they're reporting in remain as true today as ever, if not more so. The question is, how do you get that news out there? What form does it take in terms of the content, as well as how is it distributed and discovered? And that's, everything has changed there. And what I think is particularly exciting is the democratization of reporting. If you look at things like Substack or Patreon and how users are now paying directly the reporters for content that they're out there reporting on in their local communities or in an industry, what is the role of a news provider? How does that sort of, link up with the relationships that are now able to be built between audiences and the reporters themselves? And how does that then influence the reporting and the distribution? So it's the principles all remain the same, but the how is totally different.
I'm going to push back a tiny bit on the idea that a consumer going direct to the journalist, and I say this as a journalist, is the best option. News providers, news organizations have long provided much more than terrific reporters. There's fact-checking, editing, vetting. There's responsibility that comes with being, well, Kat, the Washington Post. Mike, when we think about this pace of technological change, these exciting changes, Patreon and Clubhouse, we could go on all day in terms of the latest things that we're expected to communicate with our customers over. How do we keep up with this pace of change? How do we embrace this technology while at the same time maintaining those high standards and doing our job, which is to provide quality news and information?
You know, you're absolutely right that the news organizations, the editors, the fact checkers, all of the people that surround the reporting is essential. And so I think that, you know, but the role of the provider in terms of the distributor, the packager, how that all plays out, how the news provider is interacting with the community as a part of the news gathering process, all of that is, I think, what's changing. And, you know, it is right now, you see examples all across the board in all sorts of different models. You know, Casey Newton, who was at The Verge, now is on Substack, and he's created, you know, The Platformer. He's a great reporter. He's got great relationships with people in the tech industry. And he's the kind of guy that I think, you know, has built a trust with his audience and is able to, you know, build a following and a model that is creating sustainable quality journalism there. And you see this also with local news reporters where their provider may have not been able to be financially solvent. They're now actually reporting on their own as trusted local journalists being funded through Patreon. And so, you know, that doesn't mean that you don't need editors and fact checkers. And that doesn't mean that, you know, the other elements of what a news provider does aren't critical, but it does mean that it's all changing, and it's really becoming, I think, much more interactive and less transactional. It's not about, here's a package, you pay for the package, we ship it to you on a truck. It's much more interactive now, I think.
I think that maybe the value has shifted a little bit in terms of the package. Kat, I think that you might have something to say about this in the sense of, well, in the context of whether or not the news is a product, whether or not what we do in the news business is create a product, deliver a product to our consumers. And if so, I mean, how does that approach affect UX? How does it make it better? I think we know that Mike thinks that maybe the package, the product, is no longer central. So I'd love to hear your take, Kat.
Well, I mean, I think the rise of the creator economy and sort of independent monetization is a fascinating trend, and one that just shows, you know, how much people continue to value news and information. And also how much they value trusted sources, which in the cases of those folks are individual people. And I think the advantage a news bundle like the Post or other large news providers have is that we have a lot of those kinds of personalities and people that we bring together into a product that can offer people a wide variety of news together with perspectives that just gives the consumer a lot more bang for their buck in a package that is a consistent level of quality, right? What's happening in the sort of independent, you know, economy, the creator economy, is that the consumer themselves has to decide case by case, you know, who they want to trust. And I think the strength of an organization like the Post is that we have a long history, you know, over a century of trust that's been built up in our product, in our processes, in our editors. And I think that does provide a lot of value. You know, the product itself is all of that content, but it's also, as you touched on, an experience with that content. So, you know, what's sort of your daily routine with the news? How can we encourage a daily routine, you know, that's helpful to you, that helps you live a better life, that helps you set up your day, that feels concise and doable in a media ecosystem that's just sprawling. And day by day, there's more and more and more to consume. So how do we make it feel approachable? How do we make it feel like something that you can get through, that you can manage and control? And I think that's where the real value comes in the bundling.
So you mentioned specifically for large news providers, and Mike, you touched on this issue that I'm about to bring up now as well. Local news is imperiled in the United States, and I wish our country was alone in this, but we're not. This is becoming an increasingly global issue, global phenomenon. And when I look at the investment that the Post makes in its digital products, in creating these experiences, in its investment in journalism, to your point, Mike. I wonder, does local news even have a chance? How can they make the investments they need to make, or how can we help? What can we do? Mike, why don't you kick us off on that?
Well, I think that local news obviously is absolutely critical. With Flipboard, we actually just expanded to more than 1,000 different cities around the United States, cities and towns, to help surface that local content, whether it's articles or video or podcasts, so that more people can discover it and easily access it. That's one of the challenges, is that in a lot of locations, the news provider, that central role, has been challenged, has gone out of business, has had a lot of financial challenges. So the economics of local news really are now, I think, going to be more focused around the local reporters, the people who are passionate, who live there, who are capable of reporting, who may have once worked at a local news provider. And I think that economy, that creator economy around local news reporters, I think is going to be really, really key to evolving. And as far as providers are concerned, I do think that there are good examples of providers using platforms in creative ways so that they don't have to build their own tech team and their own kind of end-to-end, paywall mechanism and so on to actually do the work that they're doing as a news provider. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity with the platform technologies that are out there now to both package up the content, the reporting, to be able to create that relationship with the audience, to deal with monetization and so on, without having to have the same level of back office capability that news providers once had to have.
Kat, did you have any thoughts on how we can help our local news brethren, or whether or not, for me, consumer expectation has just changed so much. The platforms that are eating the local news business have also shaped consumer appetite. They have changed our expectations around what news will look like, how it will get to us, and how we experience it. And it just feels to me like the local news just doesn't have the pockets of the Washington Post, and maybe the individual writers is the answer. But what do you think, Kat?
Well, I agree with Mike on this one. I think what the individual creator economy has shown us, which has succeeded in a lot of local markets, whether it's individual writers or groups of individual writers who are using fairly low tech, out of the box solutions and really focusing on content that really matters to their communities. At its most basic, the journalism is what matters. And especially in local, I think, if you have to pick an area to focus, that's going to be what to focus on. And then to use some of the existing tools in order to figure out how to package and monetize it. There's a lot that comes, out of the box there. And I think that what we're seeing now is pointing toward that the people are willing to pay for that when they get recurring value from, the journalism that they're seeing, whether, it's in newsletters or small sites, whether it's in podcasts. There's all kinds of different mechanisms by which people can distribute this work. But it has to be something that's essential to people. And so I think, there's a lot of encouraging signs in the way that sort of independent stuff is growing.
All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. I don't know about you guys, but I keep waiting for recommendation engines to actually work. Okay, thank you. It's not just me. So when we look at AI right now, I'd say one of the most exciting things we see is that machine learning AI, it's going to help us better recommend and inform people. And yet we have issues of algorithmic bias. We have, what I want to know is, when we look at AI, when we look at machine learning, what can we be excited about and what should we be more careful about? Kat, do you want to kick us off?
I think we should be excited about sort of connecting people with the content that's most relevant for them. That's, the applications that we think about the most at a place like the Post. It's with the volume of things we publish, how do we guide people through the work that we have and connect them with the topics that are most relevant? And we're doing that through a combination of implicit and explicit signals, just asking people to tell us what they're interested in instead of just trying to anticipate it. And I think that is going to be a huge area of growth and investment. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people kind of doing it that way. A combination of sort of human curation on various topics, along with the relevance and the personalization that brings those topics in front of certain users who are specifically interested in them. I do think we have to, continue to be mindful of sort of the pitfalls of automating too much, because news is a special case. You're not interested in sports perhaps until something happens in sports that's very much a part of the conversation, and you need to know about it. And so that's why we have editors, and we'll continue to consider editors a differentiator for our news product and bundle. And I really do think that users, readers, they value that layer of curation, human curation, that's combined with the algorithmic recommendations or relevance engines.
Mike, what do you think? AI, friend, foe?
There's an old saying in computer science: garbage in, garbage out. And algorithms are designed by people, they're powered by people ultimately. And so we really think that journalists, the role of the news provider, coming back to how we kind of started this conversation, this is where the news provider really plays a massive role. There is no algorithm for trust. There's no algorithm for truth, right? Only people can do that. Trained journalists, trained editors, people who understand how to look at what is a good reporting versus not good reporting. This is absolutely essential. And that role, for example, at the Washington Post plays, that's what establishes that trust, that why people come to the Washington Post and pay for the Washington Post, which, by the way, I'm a proud subscriber. And so I think this is absolutely critical. And platforms, unfortunately, have tended to be oriented around most recent, most interacted with, most clicked on, and that is not what good reporting is, right? It might be, but if it's content that is clearly false and is just designed to get people to click on it, that's the kind of stuff that surfaces to the top of most of these algorithms, because that's mostly how they're tuned and how most of these platforms are designed. Works great for your friends, right? It's a great algorithm to find out what are your friends doing yesterday, last night, but not good for content and for news. And so this is where editors, real live editors, controlling the algorithms, managing the algorithms, so that you do have that relevancy Kat talked about, and that personalization. You can't do that at scale with people, but having that combination of people and algorithms, that's where the future lies.
All right. Now I want to take us into the future. Mike, what are the tech advancements? What are the opportunities that you are most excited about for the news business right now?
I would say the two that we've talked about today, the point that Kat made, that, human curation, editors curating content in partnership with algorithms that provide personalization. That's one. The other one is the democratization of the reporting itself, creating, a more of a network of reporters and relationships with audiences that are provide actually probably deeper, more meaningful reporting in the end that people will pay for. So I think those are the two biggest that I see.
Kat, what are you excited about?
I'm also really excited about relevance. I'm excited about how we deal with and shed light on, the things like deepfakes through, a lot of the visual forensics works that we're doing, I think is really, really interesting. I'm really interested in how we translate journalism into platforms like TikTok, Instagram Live, sort of what do we do with sort of short form video and storytelling I think it's only going to grow. And it's a really exciting space for us to understand, how to tell stories in over time.
Well, thanks, you guys. That was a terrific conversation. Excited about the news business as always. And back to you in Toronto.